All the measurements for this cage cover will be in the description. We're making this out of fleece. The cool part about doing this out of fleece is that fleece is wide. It's 60 inches wide when you open this up like this, which kind of allows you to get 2 panels. So I could do 2 side pieces out of one measurement instead of with flannel where it's not quite wide enough to get the sizes you need in width, so you have to use more of it than you do for fleece. So we're going to start with the side panels because our cage cover is not going to have front panels like my previous tutorials. It is going to have a piece across the top that's rectangle, and it's just maybe about 10 inches just to help hold everything in place. But you'll need 2 side pieces, 2 side panels, a back panel, the top piece, and a small rectangle panel for the front. So we're going to start with the side pieces. We're going to measure a piece of fleece that is 66 inches by 27 inches wide. So to do that, I'm just going to take my fleece, I'm going to fold this in half till it reaches, I'm cutting it in half because I have a table to work with and it's easier to do it this way. So I'm just cutting a piece now that's 66 inches long. So what I'm doing now is I want to make sure my bottom's nice and straight so that when I go to do this next step, everything ends up the same length. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut off the selvage on this side. I need this, and then I'm making this, basically what I'm doing is I'm making this 27 inches wide. Now I'm going to turn this because I use my table to do some of these measurements. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull these apart. These are our side, this is going to be our side panels. This is the right side of the fleece, so kind of pay attention to that. Okay, set this aside for a second. You know, we can only do one at a time. And now what we have to do is we have to fix the raw edges on the sides so that when we have our cage cover, we're not looking at raw edges. But first we're going to start at the bottom. I'm going to fold this 1 inch in, and then I'm going to fold it over again, okay? And then we're going to fold up one side, and then I will show you how to do the other side to make sure you do them correctly. Alright, so like I said, I'm just going to fold this I'm going to fold it about 1 inch. Try to fold it evenly if you can. There's lines on my table that I follow, so if you're wondering how I'm willy-nillying this, I'm really not. Okay, now I'm going to fold this roll over again. Now remember, your fabric should be facing right side down so that when you're rolling this, this will be on the inside of your cover and not on the outside. When you do your bottom and get it all nice and pretty, you're going to go up one side and you're going to fold it over like this. And then when you go to do the other panel, you're going to fold the same way, but you're going to do it to the opposite side. It's really important that you do that. And it'll make more sense in the end, because if you roll the same, if I come over and do the exact same thing I just did here, when I put my cage cover together, your raw edges are going to be exposed. And it's not going to be what you want it to be. We're finishing the edges that can be seen from the outside. And there's no front panel. So instead of your front panel, where we normally do this on the front panels, you have to do it on the side panel because there is no front panel. But you don't want raw edges hanging off the side of your cage cover. I'm going to put a decorative stitch on this and it'll look pretty. It'll actually work out great. Okay, so now that you've done that, we're just going to fold this. Okay, so now what I've done is I'm folding this in half. I'm going to set this aside, but before I do, it's important that when you're doing these, because you're doing these pieces all separate, I like to measure and make sure that I know exactly the length, because I want all my length to be the same across every single panel that I do. So I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did, except when I go to roll this the edges, I'm going to roll this side now instead of this side. Okay, so for your back panel, it's going to be 37 inches wide. So to do that, I find it easier to open up your fabric, and I folded it in half long ways, so that now from here to here is 60 inches, okay? Because it's the only real way to measure the measurements you need. You can't do it the way we just did our side pieces, because the fabric was folded in half and we were still able to measure what we needed. But for the back panel, it's longer than the fleece. We need a length that is longer than the fleece is folded in half the way it comes off the bolt. So we just opened it up so that we could get that full length that we need. Okay, so now this is your back panel. If you open it up, it should be 66 inches long and 37 inches wide. Now turn it so that the right side is facing down. And we are going to roll the ends. We don't need to roll the sides, just the ends. So we're going to do the same thing we did to our side panels. We're going to roll the ends an inch, and then we're going to roll it again. The piece that you have left from your back panel is should be perfectly wide enough to do the piece along the front. That's going to be about 10 inches when we're all said and done. That piece will help hold everything in place. So now you have your piece that's 37 inches by 12 inches. And we're going to just roll it an inch up from the bottom. So this will be the part that hangs freely. Okay, the last thing we need to do or cut out is your top. The top will need to be 26 inches by 37 inches. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, this is my top, so this is going to be the top of the cover. We don't need to do anything with that right now. All of the edges that you rolled, we're going to take over, I'm going to take over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch them in place. So I'm going to use a decorative stitch because I like it, and I'll show you guys which stitch I use. I use it on my Bernina. Okay, so my industrial sewing machine just only does a straight stitch. Okay, so I use this stitch and I just widen it to 245. Okay, so the stitching looks like this. Okay, so now what you need to do is you need to get your top. So this is the top. We're going to put it so that the right side is facing me. So the right side, this is going to be a side that's out once it's all said and done. So have that face you. Now you want to grab your long piece, your front part, the part that is 36 or 37 inches long by 10 inches wide. Lay it like this so the raw edges match, and then flip this on top of this. Line it up. Alright, clip that down into place. We're going to go over to our sewing machine and we're going to sew this in place. Don't sew the sides. You're only sewing across from here to here. Do not sew the sides, just from here to here. Okay, so now that you've sewn that, you will just flip this so that now it's hanging or whatever. This is your front panel. So when you're looking at your cage, this part will hang down like this. Okay, so lay that so that it is right sides facing up. This is going to be the front of your cage right here, your seam. Now go get a side panel. Now your side panels, if you remember, one side should be finished, should have that decorative stitch on it. You want to make sure that you put the right side of your side panel facing the right side of the top of your cover. You also want the finished bottom to be at the bottom. So we're going to turn this like this, lay it out. You want to line it up with your fabric at the top so the raw edges are together, and that the decorative finished edge is facing the front, is lined up with the front of your cover. Right at that seam, you want that decorative, that the side of your panel to be right lined up with that seam, and you want these lined up right here. And just clip that in place. Okay, I want to show you guys something because I think this is important, especially with fleece, because sometimes fleece gets heavy and it stretches. So if you've got this all lined up, you're getting ready to stitch it, and you roll this piece over, and you see that up here in the corner, that your side panel is substantially bigger. There's space where, here, let's zoom in. Okay. You see how this is extra fleece? I don't know if you guys can see that really well. Here's the end of my top of the top of my cover. You have about an inch or so of fleece that is not lined up like this is down here. If you have that, you need to cut that off. If you do not cut this off and get rid of this additional extra stretchy or whatever happened, when you go to put this together at the end, it's going to bulk up in your corners and you're not going to be able to stitch it right. It's going to dry. It's crazy. I've done hundreds of these covers at this point. It's something about the way the fabric stretches sometimes. That's because something happened. It stretched, or I cut it crooked or something. Catch that now, because trying to fix it later is going to be really difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm just cutting it to line it up. I mean, if you don't want to feel comfortable doing that, or you think, I don't know, I've never had an issue. I've had an issue leaving it there and not taking it off. That I've had an issue with. So, just my experience. Okay, so now everything's nice and lined up. That's what you want. You want to make sure everything's lined up. And we're going to go over to our sewing machine and we're going to stitch this down. We're not stitching the sides, just stitch, well, we're not stitching the back. So do not stitch the side of this cover to the back. Just stitch it right along the edge right here. You've stitched that on. Just flip that backwards, just like you, that was kind of wild. Lay that out like this. Now you're going to go and get your next side panel. You're going to put it the other way. So you remember, you want it right sides facing together. This is the right sides facing up. If you did this correctly, your finished edge of your side should be lined up with the front of your top piece, just like on the other side, except opposite. So once you get this like this, you're going to do the same thing, and you're just going to stitch straight across here. Now need to add your back panel. This is pretty easy. You want the right sides facing together. You want your nice finished bottom edge at the bottom. You want to line, just line up the edges. You want this to line up against your side seams on both sides. And you want the back to line up against the back. And then you're going to stitch from here to here, so straight down. So now what you should have is your cover laid out somehow. I know not everybody has a table, but what I do is I normally lay it out so it's like a kind of like a cross, for lack of a better description. Sides, front, back. So now we need to close it. We need to close all the parts, the edges, the sides. So we're going to get our clips. I always start with my front. What you need to do is you need to match this raw edge up to this. Okay, this is your shortened front, okay? This is your side with your decorative stitch. This is the front. You're going to take this front panel and you're going to line up the raw edge with your decorative edge, just to wherever it ends. So clip that in place. Don't be afraid to make it go, like, you kind of force it in that direction. All right. So what you're going to do now is you're going to go over to your sewing machine. And you're going to stitch from here to here. Now I've been doing 1/2 inch seam, so I am going to back stitch just to put on. you're going to go right over this corner. You're just going to go right over it. And then you just, if you look at it from the front, this looks like a corner. That's it. That's the corner of your cage. So you're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay. So you're going to do the same thing to the other front part. I'm going to kind of scooch it over so you can see. This is my back panel. This is the other side of my side panel. What you need to do is you need to find the bottom that has not been stitched yet. So this is the bottom. You're going to find the bottom of your back panel so the raw edges are together. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you need to match your raw edges up, right sides facing together, and clip them. Okay, so you go into your sewing machine. I start with the bottoms, and you're just going to stitch all the way to the very top. All right, this is the bottom. I just want to make sure everything's lined up nice and perfect. All right, so what you should have left is just your other back corner that hasn't been attached. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to find your side panel. You're going to take the bottom of your side panel, match it up with the bottom of your back panel that has not been sewn yet. Alright, so I'm going to go over to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew my last side up and then trim off any strings or any excess fabric. And that's it. That's the cage cover. This is a cage cover I recently made for my own cage that has no front panels. So this is kind of what yours should look like when you're done.